Welcome to the Brand Archive, a podcast by the good kids where we dive into nostalgic brands, find out what worked, what didn't work, and what we can learn from it along the way. I'm Ben.
And I'm Ashton.
Today we are diving into a glittery, cute, colorful file that has a little bit of darkness on the inside.
Ooh.
Today we're talking Lisa Frank.
So Lisa Frank, the team was so excited about this one, and I've run into so many people on the street who are just like pumped about it as well. And I almost am like embarrassed to admit that I had to like Google.
You didn't know what Lisa Frank was?
No, and I feel awful because I'm a 90s kid, and
right.
The second I Googled it, it was like, oh my gosh, like the memory is walking through Walmart, picking up my school supplies, came flooding back. Mm-hmm. But as a kid, I must just not have paid attention to the logo or the brand. Like I just saw the illustrations, and that was what was familiar to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, you must not have had any of the merchandise.
I don't think I did, honestly.
You never had a pencil or with
maybe
a
if I was
tiger
like
on
gifted it or something, or like I borrowed it from a friend. But
yeah.
I don't recall actually buying those things myself, either because my parents were on a budget or because I'm a very neutral person, and maybe I've been that way since a kid. I don't know. But like literally like today, her designs are like my nightmare. Like I would never let my daughter walk around with her stuff.
What if your daughter really wanted it?
If she really, really, really wanted it and she used her own money to pay for it, then that's fine.
Of course.
But like I'm not going to ever actively encourage or entice her to, I don't know, it's just so, like my eyes just, it's way too much.
Yeah, well, and as we'll find out as we go along, these products were a lot more expensive than the other ones, so so that does make sense. So I grew up I was a little bit older than you, so I did know about Lisa Frank, and honestly, I didn't necessarily register that it was its own thing. This is so funny. I didn't find out that Lisa Frank was the name of that art style until I was maybe in high school or something like that. I'm not that old, but when I was younger, I just thought that that's a girl's trapper keeper. I didn't know that that art style had a name and a brand of its own.
Sure.
And I think a big part of that was, first of all, we didn't buy brand name things when I was little. That wasn't necessarily a thing. And then also, I was searching high and low for like a boy's version of Lisa Frank, and sure enough, there wasn't one. But the closest thing, when I found this, a little thing got unlocked in my heart, and I was like, oh my goodness, I never had one of those, and now I want it so bad. But I'm talking about Yikes pencils.
Okay.
And these were kind of like in the same vein as Lisa Frank, where they had really vibrant colored pencils, and these were marketed towards boys, like angsty boys that couldn't focus on their homework, sort of thing. But I knew about Lisa Frank. I saw it, but I didn't know it was an actual thing until I was much older. So I guess I'm kind of there with you.
Yeah, and I saw them everywhere, like as I was shopping, but I also didn't make the connection as a kid that it's all from the same company either. I think I just assumed it was all these different companies putting out these products and so forth. So it was really cool to go back and kind of uncover the story of Lisa Frank.
Yeah, and speaking of uncovering the story of Lisa Frank, full disclosure, I did watch the Amazon Prime video docuseries Glitter and Greed, which I do recommend. It's really well done. It's really interesting. If you love the drama of things, you're gonna love it. I'm hoping that we don't talk too much about what was in that docuseries, but there's a lot of story to be told if you're interested in Lisa Frank. Just dig a little bit. You'll find some stuff. It's fun.
That's going to be the first thing that I go home and watch tonight.
Yes. Yeah. And then you'll want these folders.
Yes. I honestly feel like we should have had a Lisa Frank folder for this episode, so.
Yeah, Yeah,
next time.
Opportunity there. So let's talk a little bit about where Lisa Frank started. Lisa Frank was born to some entrepreneurial parents who were really encouraging to a young artist, and so she had a really good start. She was, born to a wealthy family, and it wasn't one of those wealthy families that are like, you have to be a part of the family business. It was like they really fostered her and helped her become the artist that she is. So when she was younger, she loved to draw and paint, and what I understand her superpower or talent to be is she's extremely skilled at spotting a trend and capitalizing on it. And she has what a lot of creatives don't, and I think this was instilled by her parents, but she has that confidence to walk into a big opportunity and say, my art is great. And how hard is that for most artists? That's probably the missing piece of most artists, is that that they can't walk into Bloomingdale and say, you're gonna want this. It's gonna help you.
Yeah, the salesmanship of it.
Right. I want to say this. Her first entrepreneurial thing that I found was that she actually bought Native American dolls or art pieces and would come back and sell them. So, there's probably some sensitivity things there, but I think that was kind of like her first real entrepreneurial push.
That's interesting. I know she attended the University of Arizona for college, and she did study art and graphic design, and so she's not just this business owner trying to sell something. Like, she is the designer, she is the creator, and she's putting to use all of the drawing and the painting that she did as a kid. And one thing that she found success with as well was greeting cards. I read that she would design these things and then she would get it licensed for greeting cards, and that's kind of one of her first earlier big breaks, was selling to kind of a higher, well-known greeting card company. And so I think, I'm guessing all of those experiences kind of showed her that she can sell her art. She's maybe good at selling her art. And so that's how she was like, okay, I'm going to start a company. So in her mid-20s, she founded a children's jewelry company called Sticky Fingers, which I just love. Like, what a name.
Yeah, and I wonder where that name came from. Because Sticky Fingers to me, and maybe this was on purpose, is somebody who's constantly stealing things. Or you just have really disgusting sticky fingers from eating candy, and right? Like, where did that come from?
Or like, I thought of the toy as a kid that I'd have, that it was like a hand and you would like fling it at a wall and it would stick.
Yes.
That probably came out after the 1970s when she started this company.
I have no idea.
But yeah, so she started that, and like you mentioned, she sold it to Bloomingdale's. And so she had that confidence to do that. And then ultimately, Sticky Fingers became Lisa Frank. So she, kind of absorbed it into her new company, because in 1979, she officially started Lisa Frank.
Yeah, and she did that by jumping into the sticker craze. Stickers are actually still really easy to sell today, but back then, in the 80s, this was a moment where it was much more rare to show your own personality. And one way that kids did that was placing stickers on all of their stuff, just to show their ownership. It was just a really powerful tool for kids in the 80s to be unique and show their individuality.
Yeah, and this is just a side story about Ashton as a kid, but
no,
this is good.
Okay.
Because I admired stickers so much, I had a whole binder covered them. But I was also, my mom was a fine artist, and so I was always drawing and stuff. And to make my own stickers, I would just draw a little thing on a piece of paper and then tape it to my binder or my water bottle.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And that was my DIY sticker.
Wait, okay, so you didn't have access to stickers?
No,
or...
I did. But if I wanted to make my own stickers, I would just draw a little piece of paper and then just use regular tape to tape it over stuff.
You could have been Lisa Frank.
I guess maybe I missed my calling.
Dang it.
But yeah, I love the stickers. And then, I mean, as like we talked about, like I remember Walmart in town, you would just walk down the aisle and there'd be everything. There'd be folders and notebooks and everything in between. And so I think she saw that stickers worked and she was like, oh, well, we can put this design on everything.
Right.
Lunch boxes.
Yeah.
Pencil holders. I mean,
yeah, and she really did capitalize on the back to school market.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting. Not a lot of brands choose that's their lane, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a strategic approach. So it'd be interesting to kind of be in the headspace at that time of the company. But it kind of makes sense because if you are targeting like elementary aged kids, you're probably as a parent more apt to invest in like a folder, a notebook, or pencils at the beginning of school than you are like throughout the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just, oh my gosh, I'm already getting excited because I loved the like going back to school shopping.
Yeah.
I just loved it.
Yeah. That's funny. Me too. Like, I really looked forward to it. And it's funny having an 8-year-old. This is a side tangent, but having an 8-year-old, I'm more excited to go shopping for like a new Ninja Turtles backpack than he is. It's maybe that's a millennial thing.
Yeah, that must be. Maybe Lisa Frank changed the game, and now we're always excited about back to school.
Yes, probably. Yeah.
Well, it's no surprise because we're in the 90s that's when the popularity exploded. So like you'd see it everywhere from classrooms to honestly like the bedrooms of kids because it continued to just be on all these products. And at their peak, they were making $60 million a year. That is a lot of money in the 90s. And I think a part of that is because she was, like you said, quick to adopt trends. So whether it was like the holographic type stickers or like glow in the dark, I mean,
or those bubble ones.
Yes, yeah. Like there was a lot that you could play with at the time, and I think she was always looking to, what's going to be the next bestseller.
Yep.
But one thing that I'm kind of amazed by is that like, she was the original designer, and she also essentially had like an art studio where all these other people were also creating these designs, because a lot of them were hand drawn because that wasn't necessarily like they had computers back then, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of time and a lot of work to create all those things.
And not only hand drawn, but obviously the style was it was airbrushed. So this is quite a painstaking process to make these illustrations.
Yeah. We're talking lots of time and energy and passion that went into all of these. And there were so many. Like, that's the thing. Right. It's like it wasn't just one character or one story. It was a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And the details were endless. There was glitter everywhere and rainbow everywhere and patterns everywhere.
Well, and to that point with what you just said there, with something like Hello Kitty, there's one character. So to learn how to draw that character, it's quick.
Sure.
And but these artists that worked for Lisa Frank were constantly producing new characters. So and they had to be in the style. So it wasn't necessarily, something they could just copy over and put her in a different pose. It was like, no, we're going to invent a tiger today. Yeah.
And now everybody has to learn how to draw the tiger the exact same way.
Yeah, or just, you have to know how the style is overall.
Yeah, that's a lot to keep up with internally. Right. In the late 90s to the early 2000s, they kind of set up their headquarters in Arizona, and it's a ginormous 32,000 square foot building.
Yeah.
And it became quite popular because even today people can go by and see it. But then around this time is also where it starts to kind of go downhill. So one of the things that happened in the early 2000s was the divorce of her husband.
Yeah.
And at the time, he was a key part of the company at that point. Obviously, she started it before they were married, but he had become an integral partner. And so there were lots of lawsuits and kind of ugly stuff that happened to get her husband, who was in the CEO position, out of the company. Which, of course, lawsuits and all that is not fun and it's not good for PR.
Yeah.
And so revenue just started to go downhill.
Yeah, and James Green, I believe is his name. He was one of the best artists. He became the art director. And I believe he introduced the computer to, at least where he was able to kind of bring the style of airbrushing into the computer. Like, he developed that workflow, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, with his absence in the 2010s, that was a major hit because he had a lot of insight, he had a lot of strategic direction. I'm sure he was keeping up on trends and design industry stuff like, we do today. But in addition to all of that, they didn't really embrace e-commerce or social media, or like more modern licensing deals, all of these like new things that came with tech and internet and all that. And so, then they dropped down to 2.3 million in annual revenue. So that's, going from 60 to 2.3 is quite a downsizing of a company. So it wasn't good.
And granted, like this building that we talked about, this 320,000 square foot building used to be full of artists. And now, even with this $2 million annual revenue, they still have this building, but there's like no artists in it.
Yeah. And it's so sad because they had to abandon it.
Yeah.
So in 2018, it was abandoned. It was listed for 17 million. But I don't believe anyone's purchased it because people, if you're a Lisa Frank fan, you go to Arizona and you can drive by it because it's very rainbow on the outside. It's very Lisa Frank. Mm-hmm. So it still sits there today. But I was fascinated that Lisa Frank didn't die. It's still on the market today.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to, I could go buy products.
Yes.
Which I think is honestly their target audience today is the millennials that were kids when it originally came out. Now they're trying to target us as parents.
Yeah.
And that nostalgia of it. But I looked on their website and they still have 9 characters and merch lines around all of those 9 characters. So they kept those. And you can get them at Walmart, Amazon, Hobby Lobby. So they're still in a lot of the major retailers, which is fascinating.
There's a story in the docuseries, and it's so funny because I think it was like 2015 or something like that, they hired a new art director, right? And he shows up with all these ideas and aspirations, and there's like nobody in the building. It's just he shows up, and it kind of, the image in my head was like a horror movie, or like when you go to an abandoned carnival or something.
Okay.
Like that's what, and I don't know what it was really like, but like while he was telling the story on this docuseries, I'm like, I couldn't imagine showing up to this like giant building and there's like big stuffed animals everywhere and you're like walking through to find the owner.
Yeah. Oh, that would be creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a fan.
No.
And then I just get a kick out of this every time I think about it or say it, but her son, Forrest, Forrest Green is his full name. He took a significant role in the company starting in 2018. So like today, I think he does a lot of the oversight and kind of leads the company. So it's interesting that there was that like family baton that was passed.
Yeah.
But Forrest Green, I can't get over that. She has one son named Forrest and one son named Hunter.
Yes.
So if you have the last name of Green, you need to get on some clever ideas because
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently when James and Lisa were naming their kids, there was a lot of like people were predicting what they would name their daughter, which is like Kelly Green or something like that. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. So thinking about the brand at a high level, one thing that I wanted to touch on is the name.
Yeah.
Because unlike a lot of the other companies that we've talked about so far in the podcast, hers is the only one so far with the name of the company is her actual name.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we have clients come to us and they ask us, should I name it Ben Brick or Ashtonhoff, whatever, and it's definitely a bold strategy. Another local example is Dot's Pretzels.
Yeah.
Because that took off and became really popular. And so that question comes up a lot, and I think there's not a right or a wrong answer, but I think one thing you have to consider when you name the company after your own name is like, are you going to be an influencer for this company because you're directly tying yourself, your own personal brand, to the company? And then what does scaling and what does your exit look like? Because if you're building a company to exit or to sell to someone, you're selling the brand with that.
Yeah.
And so you have to be okay releasing, like if Lisa Frank sold it to Bloomingdale's again, she'd be selling her name essentially, and her brand with that. And so if you are considering what to do with your name of your own company, consider those two things for sure. Is like, are you going to be an influencer for it? And what's that exit plan look like? Because for her, I think she does want to like stick with it because she's still there today.
Yeah.
But obviously a lot of personal things in her life with her husband and her family, those probably made a lot of the headlines because her name is the name of the company.
Yeah.
There's no distance between the two.
Yeah, that's smart. I think another thing to consider is, are you willing to really stand behind the quality that your business is going to do forever?
Yeah.
Because your name is, the business is your signature. So, so you really, that's kind of the benefit, and the bad part, the good and the bad of it is that you really are putting your stamp on anything that your company ends up doing. And sometimes that could lead into, if you trust the wrong person with your business, your name could get dragged through the mud with that business. So there's goods and bads with it. I think you gain trust quickly with the name, but then, there could be negative sides to it.
Yeah. And then the logo I had to look it up to reference it because it's been so long since I've really paid attention to all of those types of products. But I noticed that today they're using the same logo that they used back in the 80s, like in their heyday.
Oh, they switched back.
Yeah, they switched back.
Okay.
Because their original logo was the name in like a script font and like a full rainbow with an outline. Yep. And then in 2005, they moved to this like oval shape, and they try to make it look, in my opinion, more 3D because it's like these curvy letters, and they have these glittery elements and this like white kind of glowing effect to it.
Yeah.
And then in 2011, they simplified it back a little bit, but also made it more complicated. I don't know. It's kind of like the cousin to the logo. It's just different. It's just more complex in different ways.
Yeah.
And like I said, today they use that original one, and honestly, to me, it's the best logo of all of the ones that they've ever made.
Yeah.
Because it still screams rainbow and Lisa Frank, but it's much more legible. I think it'd be easier to use on all of the things, and I could see it being a one color, no problem. So as far as like usability, it's just a lot better.
Yeah, it's way more recognizable, the silhouette of it, than the oval ones. Apparently, what's his name? James Green was going to get a job at Lisa Frank, and Lisa Frank, I believe this is how it went. This is what I remember from the story, is that she just put these two artists against each other and said, make the logo for the company. And James's logo won. And so this is the logo he made for the company. And then he got hired because of that.
The original one.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
And then he got to marry her. Yeah, so it's a good logo. Yeah, he really won.
Yeah.
No wonder it was hard to leave the company. He's also leaving the logo.
Right. But yeah, no, 100%. I agree that the old logo is much better than what they did after. And the stuff after looks way more adolescent.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of Bratz dolls for some reason.
Yep,
don't know why. Not that it's copying anything.
The proportions or something of the letters.
It almost seems like Lisa, like the first logo reminds me of like the more mature feeling of, this is silly, but like a Barbie feel. And then the second stuff is more like aging it down into that
oh yeah
brat
definitely
style.
yep.
Yeah. Yep.
The other thing that I think worked in their favor as a brand was that when it comes to their differentiator, they really were able to stand out because there really wasn't a ton of competition.
Right.
It was just these other, your classic red or your classic green notebooks and folders and stuff like that. Like, I don't think anyone else was really leaning into these custom designs for school supplies.
Yep. Yeah, so if you're looking for a folder, you see like different brands, they just put one color on the folder. And I think they maybe had some designs, but this Lisa Frank was so consistent that it would take up a portion of the store, and you can see that it all, if you bought all of them, they would all kind of look the same and you'd have a cohesive set. Whereas I think companies like Trapper Keeper were making designs on things, but it wasn't like cohesive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and if she's introducing these characters that kids are falling in love with, I mean, you're not going to just want a character on your notebook. You're going to want it on your folder and your pencil, and like you kind of start to feel like your pal needs to be with you everywhere. So you're just going to buy the same character on all the things.
Yeah. And to your point earlier here, I wonder what parents thought, and maybe parents didn't care, but like I think the parents back then didn't ever have these options before, so I wonder how they felt when their kid was like asking them for something that cost 3 times what the regular version of that was. Like if you wanted, you could buy these HB pencils, these Ticonderoga pencils, or you could buy these Lisa Frank ones that have cute little tigers on them, and you're paying 3 times the amount. I wonder what the parents were thinking as this was formulating.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what mine were probably thinking.
Yeah.
They're probably thinking, no way.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a kid, of course you're going to want that one with the dinosaur or the bear or whatever it is,
I don't know how you're supposed to be popular without buying stuff like that. How are you supposed to even get a good seat at the lunch table if you don't have these Lisa Frank pencils,
right. Or to hand them out at your birthday party, right?
But Lisa Frank, it was such an anomaly. I think that's the word. But it was one of a kind in the sense that this was just a giant production house that was licensing out their illustrations to things like school supplies or bed, like you said, like pillowcases or whatever. But it wasn't like other things where Barbie had its dolls and I mean, there's just all the other things that we're licensing to things like lunch boxes, like Hot Wheels cars, Ninja Turtles. All these things had extra things that they had to maintain. And maybe those were revenue sources, and maybe that was a really great thing. But this company was relatively light in the sense that they were just focusing on that one goal of producing art for things.
Yeah, there was no TV show or other product or toy that was associated with it. Yeah. Yeah, it was so bright and bold and rainbow that people could just not ignore it. So we talked a lot about what made Lisa Frank work. But like you said earlier, there's kind of this like dark side to Lisa Frank that I think the documentary uncovers a little bit more about. But I think one area that it really damaged the brand, probably the entire time, but more publicly, like recently, was the internal culture that she was building. Because a lot of times we think about brand from a public facing perspective of what do our customers think, what do the community think, but brand also really directly impacts your team because they're rallying around a mission and they're working in a workplace. So what is the culture? What are your values? How are you operating? And that's where I think it was a hot mess, it sounds like.
Yeah, it sounds that way.
Just with her team. What were some of the things that you saw that were like major red flags, especially as an illustrator.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny looking at it from the perspective of like they have basically one job, like we just talked about. They're not doing a bunch of different things. They are focused on producing art and churning out art. Of course, it needs to be good, but I think there was a very tiny bottleneck in this company, and that was that the two, Lisa Frank or James Green, depending on who's in charge at the time, was the sole approval person for everything. Like, you'd show them a sketch, you'd show them your airbrushing, you'd show them what it looks like mocked up, you'd show them the advertising for that thing. So, and this wasn't their only job. Like, they had to go sell the thing, and they had more jobs than just approving art. I think that is the most focused version of the problem, but that leaked into a bunch of different things, namely the high amount of revisions that would have to be made, especially from a new artist. So as a new artist, you would get an assignment to draw something, and you would draw it up and you'd show them your sketch. And basically, modern days, you would see somebody's art as a creative director. You'd see somebody's art and maybe give them 3 things where it's like, oh yeah, if you move this, if you turn this up and you move that to the side, or you focus on these 3 things, clean these 3 things up, that's going to give a production artist something to grab onto and move forward. Mm-hmm. The feedback most commonly given to a production artist at Lisa Frank seems to be, it's not right, or that's obvious, why would you do it that way, or that's not good. Something like that. So it would tear... Huh?
Just super negative.
Yeah, so it would just tear at the hearts of these artists who they didn't think that they could be an artist, and now they finally made it, and then they get there and it's just not what they wanted out of an art career.
Well,
right?
Yeah, and I'm sure they're trying so hard to do it right? To impress, to make it outstanding. But if they're not given the tips and the tool and the education around, like, why is this wrong?
Yeah.
Then that's tough. That's tricky.
Right, and so the only way, I guess I should say, I looked up, it was common for things to get, like, dozens of revisions. So if you're sketching...
Yeah.
And they say it's not right, then you think of what's wrong with it? You try to think and you draw something new. Maybe you change the eyes, and they say it's not right again. This would go on for like 12 times or more.
Yeah.
For a new artist, right? Somebody who just got there, because they don't know what the art director and the creative director are looking for.
Yeah.
So you're just exploring, and you're finding through time and frustration what these people want from you. But I couldn't imagine how frustrating that would be to be an artist. And because of moments like that, we have a high turnover, which means people are fed up with this, and I'm leaving. And second of all, it takes a very long time to train somebody like that. So you're dealing with training new artists all the time.
Yeah. And
it's a very slow training process. So I think as far as what was most difficult on this company, it's something right there. If I was hired as the creative director of Lisa Frank, this would be the thing that I would be like, oh, if we fix this, we're going to make a lot more money.
Yeah, because, if you're selling art, you need artists. That impacts everything, right? Because if you have a high turnover, either you're going to be stressed out on deadlines because everybody's working overtime, or you're not going to have the ability to do a collaboration or to do this new art piece, and so then you're leaving money on the table.
Right.
Like, it just kind of infuses all other aspects of the company.
And the sad part is, and don't get me wrong, the art direction of Lisa Frank is on point. Like, it is a thing for a reason, right? So I don't want to necessarily tear it down.
Yeah.
But I think that they could have learned a little bit by just feeling out where their artists are taking things and just saying, that's really great. Make sure that the eyes of this tiger look like the eyes of the leopard, right? But if you do things like that and you're helping these younger artists learn how to draw in the way that we need them to draw, we're going to have better quality control. We're going to have faster art, people staying for longer, and people who are happy to be there. So it's this multiplier that would just fix, I would think, most problems.
Yes, yes. And then unfortunately, it wasn't just with her team. There were a lot of licensing deals, one with Glamour Dolls in particular, that went way south. Just because she was really slow to respond, because maybe she was picky and didn't lend approval and all that kind of stuff. But now there's these like hanging lawsuits out there with all of these licensing contracts. Yeah. And so it didn't work out for vendors either. So it kind of sounds like the same frustration, just from vendor versus employee. Yes. And then the other thing that didn't help their brand reputation either was the divorce with her husband, because from what I read, it was very public. There were headlines, it just kind of tarnished the image. And again, that's where having your name as the company name really sucks. But even just outside of the drama of that, like the loss of his role in the company, like we talked about, obviously had other impacts. And so the combination of, your main art director, aka your husband, leaving the company, these frustrated vendors with licensing agreements that aren't pending out well, and then this constant turnover and micromanagement of your team, that doesn't necessarily add up to a great team culture. Right. And that is a huge part of your brand that now is negative, and it's going to be painted in a bad light. And so I think that definitely added to the downfall to some degree, right? Yeah. From different aspects. So not the best brand reputation.
No. And with all this talk about micromanagement, let's introduce you to our next sponsor, Macro Management Solutions.
This episode is brought to you by Macro Management Solutions, the only consulting agency that promises to stay out of your way completely. At Macro Management Solutions, we don't meddle in your business. If you're interested in spending late nights in spreadsheets, chasing down invoices, handling every phone call, and double-checking the font size on your pitch deck, we're the perfect agency for you. We believe your hands should stay full and your plate overflowing. We'll handle the macro level stuff while you stay buried in the weeds. Macro Management Solutions. Vision without interference.
Gosh, I feel like I could work there.
I think Do you
think I'd be good?
Yeah, I think you'd be a great
fit. I should apply.
You should.
Yeah. All right, so as we think about takeaways from Lisa Frank, a few things that stand out to me is just being a designer myself, and now a business owner. I think you see this a lot, right? Where just because you are a talented designer, illustrator, doesn't necessarily equate to being a good team leader or business owner, because those are two completely different skill sets. Yes. And I do think there are a lot of skill sets that a designer has, the problem-solving kind of mechanism that works very well for starting a business, but they're not equal. And I think, I don't know if it was Lisa herself or her ability to not delegate, but, that is something that you should consider as you start a company, or even considering like what your role is going to be long term. Yeah. It might sound really fun and I don't know, like from the outside look really cool to be this manager or a director of something, but if your heart and your passion, your strengths are with the design itself, like that's okay too. Another thing that we've already talked a little bit about, but is just this idea of how like your internal brand and your internal team culture will eventually become public. And I would argue in today's world, it's going to become public a lot faster than it did back in Lisa Frank's era, because your company culture speaks volumes around who you are as a company. And people are going to find out about that. And so I think, even though a beautiful brand, even if it's covered in rainbows and glitter and sunshine, it can only mask that dysfunction internally for so long before it totally blows up. And so it's not really a sustainable model to have this beautiful outward facing brand, but internally to not live up to the mission and the values that you set forth. And so that's something to consider in any organization, is just what is the internal brand and the team culture that you're creating.
Yeah.
A lot of the episodes that we've talked about in the past is about innovation, right? And how the product potentially innovated. And in this case, I feel like the product didn't necessarily fail to modernize, because we still see the products today. And kids, I'm sure, will still be super excited to get that folder or that binder. Yeah. But I think what failed to modernize is her marketing. And I think for any organization, you have to keep up with the consumer journey and the consumer demands and just the culture of what's going on. Because like with her, she didn't utilize social media. She didn't think about e-commerce. And those are things that today are like second nature. Yeah. Right? It's like a duh. Yeah. And so we always have to be constantly thinking through, how do we meet our customers where they're at and not be stubborn about, well, I expect them to come to me or to find me how they used to. So I think that's something to always think through, is maybe your product's not wrong, but maybe you just need to market a little bit differently.
Yeah. And while I was doing this, you researching Lisa Frank, I've been on this kick of like, I wish that there was a nostalgic brand that I could buy and bring back to life. Something that fascinates me is the idea that you can buy a brand separate from everything it's attached to. So with the Lisa Frank, you could, well, if they would allow this to happen, I'm not saying it's on the market right now, but you could buy the Lisa Frank name, and then the merchandise, all the artwork would be able to be sold or bought separately. I think I did a ChatGPT search on, well, what would the Lisa Frank brand be valued at? And I think it's somewhere around $10 to $25 million. Of course, that's ChatGPT, so I have no idea. But I mean, that's huge. If that's even in the ballpark, that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily come with the building and the people and the artists and all that. You're talking just the brand.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, so for our audience question, we were curious, could the good kids produce a Lisa Frank pencil?
Yes. Well, no, probably not. But again, I was playing around with ChatGPT, and I was like, well, okay, what if I just want to license artwork for a pencil, and then the good kids could do a collab piece, an ideation pencil where there's like dream stuff on the pencil, and then there's a little GK in the corner too. Let's just kind of go through what it could look like if we went into that. So right off the bat, if I want to sell a pencil for, have a year's license, so I could sell this pencil for a year. Mm-hmm. And it's just pencils in the United States. We're looking at, I think it's around $10,000 to license this pencil. I could be wrong, but if it's in the ballpark, that's a lot of money for pencils.
Yeah.
Then we would be looking at maybe giving her, Lisa Frank 10% of the royalties. So we have to bump the price up at least 30% just to cover that license, just to break even on that licensing fee. I mean, more than that, but for the 10%, you'd have to lift it up probably 30% just on that alone. Mm-hmm. But here's the biggest problem. So that's all fine and dandy if I could hit the ground running with marketing, do a nice Kickstarter, get this going. That's all good. Mm-hmm. What I think would kill us oh boy. Is I know that I am a little bit more, I don't know if creative's the right word, but I'm going to want to push the boundaries on this whole Lisa Frank brand. I'm going to want to see if I could do like an alligator and something like that. Maybe like a space guy riding an alligator, which would not fly. I already know that.
Sure.
But I know that I'm going to want to push some boundaries. So we're looking at maybe 12 revisions. And if we have 10 business days apart on every revision, we're looking at 120 business days to get this art on a pencil. And then I have maybe half a year to sell God knows how many pencils to make my money back.
So that's the story, is that we could, but we probably shouldn't.
We probably won't. Sorry.
We probably don't advocate for that unless you're huge.
Yeah, if you know what you're doing, I think it's fine. But we don't.
No.
Awesome. Well, that's what we have on Lisa Frank today. Join us next week as we open the case file on an iconic children's TV channel. We're talking Nickelodeon.
Yes. If you'd like to hear more from the podcast, be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen, and make sure to engage with us on social media.
Bye.